morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming over. I'd like to start our gathering through a little word of prayer and praise. Just pause for a few moments. Let's pray. Lord God, creator of all, thank you for allowing us to have this intellectual exchange. We recognize how it is both a responsibility and an honor to be given the opportunity to inquire and search for answers. Praise you, Lord, for Dr. James Liu and his students for gracing us with their presence today. May this day be filled with more learning and growing in both communication skills and enrichment of the mind. We lift all these all for your glory. Amen. I'll call on Dr. Liu to open us.
Good morning, everyone. This is the moment that we've all been waiting for, right? And this is actually going to be the 9th year of our tradition between NSYSU and MAK. And just briefly, I'm sure Mrs. Beha have told you what we're going to do. The first part is the structured debate, where we have, you see the color-coded for today. NSYSU is the red team proposition. MAK is the blue team opposition. So I will call first proposition rebuttal, or first opposition rebuttal, or constructive. Then that's your cue. You see if you don't know if your proposition or opposition color is your blue color, and they're the red color. Okay. And each speaker only has 2 minutes and 15 seconds. So the timer will ring at 2 minutes. That's an indication that you have to wrap up. If the time is up, then I'm going to stand up and kick you off the podium. Okay, so it's very, very important you adhere to the time constraint. And the reason why we're here is that my students are taking my scientific English course. I use debate as a platform as for non-native speakers to integrate thinking, writing, listening, speaking, creative thinking, and teamwork all into this. So part of them are debating you today, and part of them are evaluating their peers. Okay, that's also a learned skill. And so, having said that, the purpose is not about winning. It's about this is a learning process. For them, I'm sure for you, you've gone through research and formulate your thoughts and you're going to articulate your opinion. So that's what we're looking for. So remember the speakers' names, because in the second part, free rebuttal, you can have a duel. Okay, if your opponent, a certain opponent's opinion is totally absurd, you can just challenge that person. Come up here for 1 minute and say, I want to challenge you, Kevin. Okay, you said something, I think that's totally unreasonable. Okay, or would you? So that's a rebuttal time. So that's open to everyone. Okay, so that's the second part. I guess I don't want to take too much time. And also, before we start, would today's MAK debaters stand up? And our captain is going to give you a little present to show appreciation to show where your Kevin, Ian, that's you. Okay. A peace offering, a little gift. Go ahead. Okay, and you can sit down. Yeah, little gift, little appreciation. 别忘了给老师一支。Okay, let the show begin. Okay, first, proposition constructed.
Good morning, everyone. I'm CK. In this topic, our team all strongly believes that the evolution is fact. Let's start with natural solution. He explained that the phenomena of biological variation between generations. Due to the genetic variation, different individuals have different survival and reproduction methods in the same ethnic group. When the environment has changed, natural solution happens naturally. Some individual with specific characteristics can pass the test of the environment, and the advantage is able to reproduce and carry on the dominance traits to upgrade. The peppermint is a classic example of natural solution. Actually, our skin color is also the result of evolution. We know that our ancestors come from Africa, and indigenous Africa have dark skin, and dark skin is a survival trait in harsh sun. Within the skin outer layer are cells that contain the pigment melanin. Melanin protects skin from the ultraviolet rays, which can burn the skin and destroy DNA in skin cells. That means the lighter skin tone is easier to get skin cancer. But more than 100,000 years ago, the ancestors of modern people left Africa. When they moved to high latitude, the sunlight and ultraviolet rays was reduced, and the protective effect of melanin was limited. Although ultraviolet rays can demand the skin and folate, but they also have important function. About 19% of vitamin D is synthesized by the skin under the stimulation of ultraviolet rays. But when the dark-skinned people reach high latitude, they cannot obtain enough UV light to synthesize vitamin D. Therefore, in high latitude, dark skin has become a serious survival disadvantage. So people in those areas has gradually lighter skin tone. So that's why I believe the evolution is fact. Thank you.
Opposition constructive.
Good morning, worthy opponents, teammates, and most esteemed guests, audience. My name is Chris, and my team, the negative, strongly believe that evolution is fiction. First of all, I would like to define the terms. Our debate is about the topic of Darwin's theory of evolution, which regards that is otherwise known as macroevolution. This is when a certain species evolves or adapts into another over time through natural selection to fit in to its surroundings and environment. The theory explains how all organisms originate from a common ancestor. Second of all, I would like to define fact. A fact is something that is known and can be proven. And evolution is a theory, so therefore cannot be a fact. And Darwin's theory of evolution especially cannot be a fact because there's nobody there to observe what happened in the beginning. Next, in the debate sense, fiction is referring to something that has not been proven or has not been backed up with evidence. Next, for our second argument, Matthew will be explaining how the biological tree of life cannot be true because of how bone structures of different species of animals are complex and different from one another. For our third argument, Michaela will be talking about how life simply cannot come from something that is non-living. And for our fourth argument, Daniel will be explaining how mutations can act and occur on pre-existing information with a created kind and how genes have to be there before it can mutate. For our fifth argument, Josh will be talking about how the probability of Darwin's macroevolution occurring. The chances are lower than 1/10 to the power of 50, then is nil, meaning that the chances are slim to never happening. Next, for our sixth argument, James Andrews will be talking about how gene mutations usually are more harmful than beneficial. And for our seventh argument, LouV will be talking about how many transitional fossils are absent in the fossil record and prove that they are unreliable. Lastly, for our eighth argument, Hope will be disproving Darwin's explanations of the age of the Earth through arguing against uniformitarianism. With that, it closes our team's opening statement. My teammates will further elaborate and explain our six arguments. Thank you.
First, opposition rebuttal.
Good morning, worthy opponents and most esteemed guests. My name is Sam, and I would like to make 2 points. Firstly, my team is debating against macroevolution, or the theory that all species have evolved from a common ancestor through natural selection, adaptation, and gene mutation, not microevolution, or small changes within a species to increase their survivability. Microevolution has many experiments and observable evidence to support it, like the skin color as CK mentioned, something the Darwinian model simply does not have. Secondly, I would like to clarify my team's stance against Darwinian evolution. We are not presenting points strictly from a creationist standpoint, or any standpoint for that matter, but simply observable, repeatable evidence refuting macroevolution. I hope this helps you better understand our team's stance against evolution. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Alan, and I totally believe that evolution is a fact. As the sexual selection is part of the concept of the evolution. Well, it can explain why some species characteristics can only present in only one sex. And I'm going to use peacock as my example. As we know that peacocks have longer and colorful tails are preferred by the females. But we all know that the longer tails doesn't help in their survivability as it improves their successive rate on mating. Well, research shows that the peacock genes was fixed as to help to improve the representation of the gene in their species so they can improve their reproductive rate. That's as my conclusion. I believe that evolution is a fact as sexual selection can explain why some characteristics can only evolve in the genes as it can define as a different kind of adaptation. Thank you.
Composition construction. Composition. Hello?
Really? Oh, okay.
Okay, hi, my name is Paige. I suppose that evolution is a fact because we found that many species are discontinuously distributed throughout the world. We take camelids as example. Let's look at the picture. The dark blue is the distribution of camelids nowadays. And in South America, we have llama, which is a genus under the camelids. And in Asia and Africa, we have Bactrian camel, which is also a species under the camelids. And the light blue is the fossil distribution of camelids. The fossil record indicates that the Asian camelids started in North America, and then they migrated into Asia, and then to Africa. And after that, they also spread to South America. And at the end of last ice age, those in North America were extinct. So, as you see, this result matches the distribution of camelids nowadays. Therefore, fossil record can not only explain why camelids nowadays are distributed in Africa and Asia and in South America, but also be the evidence that they can have common ancestor. So, without evolution, how do you explain the relevance between fossil record and the distribution of camelids nowadays? I don't think that it can just explain by coincidence. So I support that evolution is a fact. Thank you.
Okay, hello worthy opponents, fellow debaters. Our team strongly believes that evolution is fictional. Our first point is that the tree of life as explained in evolution is proven false through multiple scientific findings. Our team's first point is to prove that intermediate forms are not consistent throughout the fossil record. As Dr. Michael Denton explains, many of the theory's explanations, such as reptile transforming into a bird,
would not make sense due to the fact that intermediate forms would have low chances of survival. However, a reptile is able to slowly obtain feathers. The presence of scales would still render it unable to fly. Not to mention the fact that inner structures are so widely different that intermediate forms of them would only render the new species extinct. Also, in National Geographic headlines, it is also believed that scientists have found a transitional species. But through the U.S. News and World Report, further research demonstrated that scientists had not found the missing link between birds and dinosaurs, explaining that the specimen assumed to be the missing link appears to be a composite. Our second evidence provides a scientific journal called New Scientist that explains how the model of the biologic tree of life was torn to pieces due to the fact that evidence of similarities between genes contradict each other. One may describe similarities through one gene, but a different tree on a different gene would explain much differently. As the Institute for Creation Research states, many new evolutionary trees contradict the traditional model, and as scientific investigators use morphology to form their own unique opinion regarding what evolved from what. It also cites that in New Scientist, its studies concluded that different genes told contradictory evolutionary stories. So in conclusion, our team strongly believes that evolution is fiction. Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Jeffrey from Morrison Academy, Kaohsiung, and I'll be rebutting my opponents CK and Alan's points. First of all, these points that they made about melanin and adapting to the environment and also sexual selection all relate to microevolutions, not macroevolutions, like the change in the tails of peacocks. And so it can't prove macroevolution, but instead you guys are using microevolution to prove microevolution. Thank you.
Second proposition is the following.
Hello everyone, I'm Stephanie. Today I want to prove biogeology can prove evolution. 200 million years ago, South America and North America were connected, and there were marsupials and placenta animals on the land. But after continental drifting, South America and North America were separated. And marsupials in North America were disappeared because due to competitors from higher placenta animals. And marsupials in South America were still alive because they don't have competitors from higher placenta animals. And let's see fossil records. It is leg and leg. Four legs, and we can know that marsupials originally used 4 legs to work, but in order to adapt to the environment, so they became jumping action. And let's see the picture. We can know that marsupials were from, all of them are from one place, Australia, and that's why I support biogeology can prove evolution. Thank you.
Third, composition construction.
Hello everyone, my name is Alex. Human selection is a process of breeding for specific characteristic, which strengthen the performance of this characteristic, while the unwanted characteristic might gradually disappear. Evolution is divided into natural selection and human selection. So I want to prove human selection is true by following example. The first example is dog. In the 1980s, Britain Cullen received a request from a visually impaired woman, and she said that she needed a new guide dog with less hair loss. After 3 years of consideration, Britain decided to breed poodle with less hair loss with Labradoodle to produce a new mixed dog, which is called Labradoodle. It has both Labrador's working ability and Doodle's appearance. My second example is chicken. Do you know chicken is different between past and present? Because of food, humans found genes that are beneficial to growth, such as high productivity and increased muscle content in specific parts. Some chicken can produce 270 to 300 eggs in 1 year, while the ancestor only produced 10 to 20 eggs in 1 year. From above two examples, we found that the characteristic of animal has been changed between generations. So humans select the characteristic they want, which is conform to the human selection, and it proves that the evolution is a fact. Thank you.
Good morning, honorable judges, fellow opponents, and guests. My name is Michaela Tam, and I am arguing for the negative side that evolution is fiction. Today, I would like to talk about the factual errors in spontaneous generation. First, I would like to define the term spontaneous generation. According to Google, spontaneous generation is the supposed production of living organisms from non-living matter, as inferred from the apparent appearance of life in some supposedly sterile environments. So, essentially, the idea of spontaneous generation states that something that is living can be produced by something that is not living. That in itself simply doesn't make sense. How can something not living create something that is living? According to evolution, the premise of this idea was used to create life on Earth. Prior to the formation of life on Earth, there was a primordial soup full of minerals and chemicals, all of which were non-living. And somehow at the right time, temperature, and environment, these materials created a living organism that later evolved into other species. However, the issue with this is that it has never been recorded by anyone, as humans didn't exist during this time, and has never been proven true by tests or experiments. The most famous experiment regarding spontaneous generation was conducted by French chemist Louis Pasteur in 1861. He made a large amount of flasks with long twisted necks, known as swan necks, to help him with the experiment. The flasks were designed like this so that air from inside and outside could be exchanged, but prevented any microorganisms from being added to the original material. He boiled some broth to sterilize and then put it in the flasks. His reasoning was that if the broth did not touch the curved neck of the flask, then it would not be impacted by microorganisms. The result of this experiment was that nothing grew from the broth. However, when the flask was tilted, it was penetrated with microorganisms that were caught in the curved neck of the flask, which allowed people to come to the conclusion that spontaneous generation had officially been disproved. Now, with this key factor of evolution being disproved, why is evolution still considered true if the basis of this theory has already been proven false in the first place? This concludes my constructive statement. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ian Lin from the opposition side. First, I would like to point out that the evidence you just gave supports microevolution, which is not what we are trying to stand for. My second point is that you talked about artificial selection, and artificial selection is selecting the desirable trait that helps us or like what we want to do. It doesn't help with survivability, so that does not go with natural selection. And even in the wild, if you were to encounter natural selection, it's probably because of adaptation, not mutation. The chance of mutation is highly unlikely, and even though it might occur, beneficial mutation is very low. That is all I have.
Mr. Composition rebuttal.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ethan. Well, in addition to human selection example which Alex mentioned, we can also find out a similar case from natural selection. First of all, let's talk about drag resistance. One of the important transmission concepts of it is to use transponction to make genes move horizontally so that genes can be transferred to another different bacteria. Take vacuumycin, for example. It's a carbohydrate antibiotic which used to treat bacterial infections. Since 1958, Vancomycin has been used to fight against particularly dangerous bacterial infections, known as the last line of defense. Vancomycin will attack the cell wall of the bacteria and block the formation of it and finally make the bacteria die. And however, in order to survive under the pressure of antibiotics, many bacteria will have rapid evolution and major structural changes lead to the multi-drug resistance occur. We can also call superbugs. It will cause the death of the patient and who is drug abuser finally. We can know that from the example, organisms do not gradually adapt to the environment, but some slight natural difference between individuals of them at birth are help them to survive. So they will have more offspring. So the more individual who can adapt to the environment, the more opportunity for them to pass on their own characters to the next generation. As time passes, the species change gradually. So in conclusion, it's clear that the previous evidence proves the evolution is a fact. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Amy, and I support that evolution is a fact. And I'm going to talk about two evidence of evolution. The first evidence is homologous organs. Different species of animals have so much difference on their body shape, depending on the organic function. But if you look at their skeleton structure, but if you look at some of their bone, you may find that there is a similarity on their skeleton structure. For example, baboons, whales, pectoral fin, and cat foot, and human hands are homologous organs. They have different shapes and function, but they are similar on their skeleton structure. And it can be an evidence that these animals have common ancestors that had adapted to different environments and evolved into the creatures we see today. Another evidence of evolution is the vestigial organs. It means some organs of some species become useless and lost their function during the adaptation, but those organs didn't disappear entirely. For example, we all know that whales don't have hind limbs, but if you look at their skeleton, you will see there is a pair of vestigial hind legs formed in their body. This shows that whales' ancestors did have hind legs and suggested to be a tetrapod that adapted from land to sea. And when they no longer need their hind legs for walking on them, they gradually become vestigial. To sum up, homologous organs can prove that different species have evolved from a common ancestor, and the vestigial organs can prove that creatures would adapt to the environment. And both support the theory of evolution. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Daniel, and I'm here to present two arguments on why the mutations of genes do not support evolution. My first argument is that mutations can only act on pre-existing information within a created kind. Dr. Gary Parker stated that the gene has to be there before it can mutate. All you get as a result of mutation is just a varied form of an already existing gene. What he is saying is that genetic mutations are limited by the information in the genes. Let's use birds as an example. We know that there are no bird species with teeth. Why? That's because their genes have no way to mutate their beaks to have teeth due to their genes not having the information necessary for a mutation to develop it. If mutation can't even change something like teeth, then how could it change one species into an entirely different species? My second argument is that mutations actually lead to a gradual loss in genetic information. It's a downward process. point inversion, insertion, deletion, and frame shift mutations that alter the DNA and mess up the genes, making them lose their original information. Mutations can create new information. However, it comes with the cost of losing more genetic information. Here's an illustration from Answers in Genesis of how that might happen. So imagine that these sentences are DNA. So let's say a frame shift happens, and due to the deletion of the letter T from the first word in the second sentence, this is what it'll look like. So from this mutation, only 5 words were made: her, ado, ni, yeah, and net. However, the 14 words from the original sentences are all lost. So the overall effect and result of this was a loss of information. So in conclusion, genetic mutations do not support evolution because mutations are limited by the pre-existing information in our genes, which means that a single species cannot eventually develop into a completely different species. The gradual loss of genetic information is further proof showing how limited mutations are, and that is why we believe evolution is fiction. Thank you.
Okay, so good morning, with your opponents. I am Jonathan from MAK. We the negative strongly believe that evolution is fiction. Okay, and so some of you guys talked about homologous organs, but even if there were a similarity and it traces back to an ancestor, like my teammate Matthew mentioned, there are missing links between fossils during their evolution process that have not been found.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Katina. I'm here to prove that fossil can explain evolution. First, in Jurassic Archaeopteryx, tail bone did not shorten, but in Cretaceous, some dinosaurs' tail bone was shorter than Archaeopteryx, and also their body size became too smaller when time gone by. And this change makes dinosaurs can fly instead of gliding. Second, we found that in the Tyrannosaur, hollow interval cavity is like hollow bone. Let's say they may have homologous organs. And we also find that in the Xenobasa dinosaur and wood speaker, they both have the same structure in the brain. Third, the bird's feeder are meant to compose of beta carotene. This is a protein that only found in bird and reptile. We all know that dinosaurs are reptile, so they used to have a common ancestor could pass down those same protein. So for those reasons, I prove that evolution is true, because the fossil shows dinosaurs gradually became to bird, not instead of appearing in the flesh. And also, if the evolution is fake, how could you explain why their tailbone shortened when time gone by and they have a protein only found in bird and reptile? Thank you.
The fifth proposition is constructed.
Hello everyone, I'm Sarah. In the first place, we indicate our position is evolution is a fact, not a fiction. Let me show you some evidence. We know most creatures have some degenerate organs which may be useless, and these organs are vestige in organic evolution. We also call that vestigial organs, which can be evidences of evolution. In fact, vestigial organs once played important roles in creatures in the past. But with natural selection, these organs has become more and more unnecessary until useless. Take human wisdom teeth as example. Although wisdom teeth grow at the end of human's mouth, there is often no HR space to contain them. Therefore, it will be very painful if our wisdom teeth grow. However, wisdom teeth used to be a useful structure. 140,000 years ago, there is a mutation in human gene, which lead to mandibular bone become short in a short time. Thus, humans now not only lose space to grow wisdom teeth, but also lose the bite force. And the human brain capacity has been greatly extended. In this case, we know wisdom teeth are vestige in human evolution process. So if you say evolution is a fiction, how do you explain that? Why wisdom teeth still exist on human now? So I support that evolution is a fact. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joshua from the team in opposition to evolution being a fact. The first point I'd like to bring up is observational science. Observational science is where you can test, repeat, and use your 5 senses to understand things. We have never once observed, repeated, or tested an animal change from one kind to another. The second point I'd like to bring up are polystrate fossils. Polystrate fossils is a fossil of a single organism that extends through more than one geological stratum. An example would be a tree that has been buried vertically. If you were to follow the view of evolution when looking at these fossils, the tree is supposed to degrade before it can be buried by all those sediments. And the third point I'd like to bring up is probability. Probability is an area of math that looks at the likelihood of an event occurring. With enough information, mathematicians can determine and predict all of the possible outcomes of an event with high accuracy. In mathematics, if the chances of something occurring are less than 1 over 10 to the 50th power, they will usually determine that the chances of that event are nil, or that they will not happen. 1 over 10 to the 50th power represents a number so large that is bigger than the estimated amount of planets in the universe. Dr. Jean Morton says the probability for arranging amino acids for 10 enzymes would be 1 over 10 to the power of 113. It is estimated that our human bodies have 25,000 enzymes. If each of these were only a small enzyme consisting of 100 amino acids with the probability of 1 over 10 to the 113th power, the probability would be 1 over 10 to the power of 2,825,000. Another way to put it is the analogy that former astrophysicist Wick Ramasinghe and astronomer Sir Fred Hoyle, who formulated the theory of stellar nucleosynthesis, came up with. They said the chances of human evolution are comparable to a tornado blowing through a junkyard and leaving behind a finished and flyable Boeing 747 airplane. I leave you with the conclusion that many scientists, like the ones previously mentioned, have reached. To accept evolution, one must first accept that the impossible has happened.
Good morning to the fellow team, Good morning to the worthy opponents, fellow teammates, and most esteemed guests. My name is LouV from Morrison Academy, Kaohsiung, and we as the negative strongly believe that evolution is fiction and not in any way a fact. I would like to bring up a rebuttal about Darwin's finches and natural selection. My opponents might claim that there are evidence for evolution. This is true, but only up to a very limited extent. Darwin's finches are a clear example of microevolution, but not macroevolution. They're closely related to each other, all being finches, but their beaks have been adapted through natural selection to the different food sources on the various islands. However, these finches also show what is required in order to expand the mechanism of natural selection to the larger or macro scale, according to stream.org. The Galapagos finches show the 2 strict requirements that must be present in order for natural selection to occur. Without these 2 factors, natural selection is powerless to evolve any organism, much less form another branch of species. First, the finches' beaks are clearly adaptive. Each adaptation gives the individual an advantage to the specific environment it dwells in, which in this case are the islands where these finches live. Their adapted beaks help them gather the various food sources on these islands with more ease. This is absolutely essential in order for natural selection to pick between variations in species. Second, there's a functional continuum among the finch's beaks. That is, between a finch with a small beak and a finch with a large beak, there are tiny step-by-step changes, and each change makes the creature slightly more fit in its environment. This is also essential for natural selection to work. A problem for the Darwinian theory is that comes in explaining evolutionary change, where unlike the case of Darwin's finches, these requirements are absent. First, there may not be a continuum, which means that natural selection cannot make large jumps or drastic changes. And each adaptation must be beneficial to the individual. And therefore, this argument is very obviously flawed and does not apply to evolutionary change in the argument for evolution, and is therefore irrelevant. Thank you.
Composition rebuttal.
Hi everyone, I'm Jessie. Today I'm here to use comparative anatomy to explain evolution. For example, the kaibab squirrels and arbor squirrels in Grand Canyon National Park can be a kind of divergent evolution. During last ice age, the arbor squirrels dispersed into the Grand Canyon area. And then, as the climate getting warming, the trees they sat on and part of the arbor squirrels themselves were limited to high elevation area like the Kaibab Plateau. And this isolated populations eventually became modern Kaibab squirrels. Like this, yeah, and which can only be found on Kaibab Plateau now. And now the arbor squirrels and Kaibab squirrels also have several distinguishing features. So, such as their black belly and their forelimbs. So, part of arbor squirrels really experienced geographic isolation for about 10,000 years, gradually formed independent and new species, kaibab squirrels. That is to say, a kind of species can be evolved by another species. Therefore, there is no doubt that evolution is a fact. Thank you.
Six, composition constructed.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rich. Here comes to my expertise, molecular biology. In our molecular biology, first I will talk about the basic elements of cell like DNA, RNA, or proteins. And my main concept is to confirm the origin of life wasn't created by God. And so let's take a look at the Miller theories. In our Miller theories, first we will changing the inorganic matter into inorganic matters into organic matters. And when we create a situation look like the beginning of the earth, there are a lot of thunders and sting, and a miracle things happen that it started to changing, and also suddenly generates RNA. So I would like to talk about RNA. In our RNA, first there are a theory called RNA world hypothesis. They also won the Nobel Prize, explain why the first life was created only by different kind of RNA, and using RNA to generate DNA or proteins. Now there are some experiments can confirm that RNA has the ability to copy and combine. In 1956, LouV do a research about the RNA copy by using heat. And another experiment is in 1980s. The scientists discovered ribosome, and RNA can copy and create in ribosome soup. So also, last it was how the first life appeared. After this result, we can know that RNA can create the first life, and we call it LouV. So the first creature was not created by God, obviously. Thank you.
Six, opposition constructed.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is James, and I'm debating for the negative side. As the negative side, we strongly disagree with evolution, and here's the reason why. According to the article of Genetics Home Reference, not all mutations lead to evolution. The only types of mutations that lead to evolution are hereditary mutations. But hereditary mutations are not common. And out of all the hereditary mutations, only about 90% of the time that they do not affect the individual, but out of 10% of the time they do. And 1 in 1,000 of these mutations are beneficial, and out of these 1% of beneficial genetic mutations, rarely any of those physically changes the organism. The percentage of beneficial physical changes are so low that it's very difficult to say that there is a link between genetic mutations and the formation of new species. Gene mutations that affect organisms are usually more harmful than beneficial. Even the 1 in 1,000th chance that a creation of a beneficial gene mutation happens, the benefits are very, very rarely include change in physical characteristics. Evolution exists as a way to help species better survive in the wild and adapt to their environment. Gene mutations cannot be connected to evolution because vast majorities of mutations are harmful or detrimental to the organism. Scientists writing in the Quanta magazine made a very controversial point, saying random genetic events, not natural selection, play the main role in speciation. This means that most mutations that happen in different species happen randomly and not intentionally. This is a big hit to natural selection and evolution, because this means that species cannot choose themselves the characteristics to adapt to, because this all happens by a small chance. In conclusion, because natural selection does not fit with gene mutations, evolution is fiction.
Good afternoon, fellow debaters, esteemed guests, and worthy opponents. My name is Ho Piang, and I will be speaking for the negative side that evolution is in fact fiction. I would like to open by rebutting the points of the fourth speakers for constructive and for rebuttal. You have mentioned about homologous structures proving common ancestry between different organisms. Well, I would like to point out differences in non-homologous development and homologous structures. So, first of all, because even if they're homologous organs, the development is different, such as the different similarities in vertebrate backbone, which would suggest common origin. But in fact, there are substantial differences in the embryonic formation of the vertebrae. This would clearly undermine the supposed homology, at least in the evolutionary sense of having derived from a common ancestor. Thus, non-homologous development in these organisms does not fit the narrative of common ancestry. Another example is in organs. The differences in organ development would not work because changes in early development stages will be detrimental towards the organism, as it will not produce anything useful. This is lethal and will not have evolved because it is not a favorable trait to pass on. Thus, this argument for evolution based off of this point is null. Secondly, I believe the sixth speaker has spoken about the Miller theory, and I believe this is based off of the Miller-Urey experiment that evolution can, about biogenesis, life coming from the creation of chemicals. Now, I would like to present an argument against this, because first of all, genes require enzymes in order to function, but genes are necessary to produce enzymes. So by evolution, which one came first and how would they exist without relying on each other? This is a contradiction. Second of all, regarding the Miller-Urey experiment, even after hundreds of replications and modifications, scientists were only able to produce less than 20 of the amino acids required. So the proteins you speak of would not be able to exist. Therefore, life would not be able to emerge. As Dr. Jerry Bergman explains, the amount of right and left-handed organic molecules also prove to be opposite types and can be lethal. So due to all these points that do not stand, we believe that evolution is fiction. Thank you.
Proposition rebuttal.
Hello, I'm Cheri. I'm here to stand for evolution. As my teammate Rich has mentioned, the origin of life isn't made by God. Here, I want to show you more about this. All living things share four characteristics. We have same genetic material called DNA, and same genetic codes which can then translate into protein, and the same central dogma includes transcription and translations, and the same building blocks such as amino acids and nucleic acids. We are all descendants from a common ancestor, and the mechanism is that the ancestor had DNA as its genetic material and used genetic codes to express its gene through transcription and translation, so that we have different gene expressions and makes the biodiversity. This tells the organism is from simple to complex. And the above I just mentioned is proved to be a truth. By sequencing the whole genome of various organisms, scientists find the results that we share about 99% of similarities with chimpanzee, 90% with cats, and 60% with chicken and banana, and 26% with yeast. Numbers can tell, and it tells us when the ancestors are giving rise to 2 or more new species. The new species will have very similar DNA at first. As the species grows and reproduce, there will be more and more differences between their DNA accumulated by gene recombination, and mutations. Briefly, species that are closely related will have a higher similarity in their DNA. And this implies the concept of microevolution. This is evidence that all of us are products of evolution and proof that evolution is a fact. Thank you.
The 7th proposition constructed.
Hi everyone, my name is Jean. I stand here to support evolution is a fact. You have heard many evidence of evolution from my other teammate just now. But what is the exactly reason that made evolution happen and change the heritable characteristic in biological population over successive generations? The answer is mutation. Mutation is an alteration in nucleotide sequence of genome of an organism. Every genetic feature in every organism was initially the result of mutation. The example is beneficial mutation that was found in exists in a human being. A small community in Italy was known to have a mutant version of protein called apolipoprotein AI Milano, which is more effective than other people's protein at removing cholesterol from cells and dissolving arterial plaques. People who have this gene have significantly lower level of risk for heart attack and stroke. The mutation was traced to one man who was born in a village in 1780 and passed the gene onto his offspring. We can see mutation keep happening in every organism. Maybe you will wonder why mutation is just a little changes, how to explain that millions of species appear on Earth. That is a matter of time. The time that humans live on Earth could only for them to see a mild changes of the genome. However, why could not there be a new species since mutation keep happen for millions or even billions of years? Since mutation was a fact, therefore, evolution is a fact too. Thank you.
Seventh proposition constructed.
Good morning to the worthy opponents, fellow teammates, and most esteemed guests. My name is LouV, and we, the negative team, strongly believe that evolution is fiction. First of all, it would be reasonable to presuppose that hypothetically, if evolution was fact, there would be a significant amount of observable evidence of transitional forms in the fossil record. However, there is not. Interestingly enough, paleontologists find themselves facing a situation where there are missing links or gaps in the fossil record, where transformational intermediates should supposedly be documented. If the theory of evolution was correct, there ought to be a considerable number of transitional structures preserved in the earth as fossils, as genetic mutations or natural selection helps a species evolve. After all, there are billions of non-transitional structures. It would only make sense to have corresponding numbers of transitional fossils as well. But besides a few examples like the walking whale or the feathered dinosaur, there are many missing transitional forms within the fossil record. The entire history of evolution, from the evolution of life from non-life, to the evolution of vertebrates from invertebrates, to the evolution of man from the ape, is strikingly devoid of intermediates. Neither is there any clue as to how the one-celled organisms of the primordial world could have evolved into the diverse, complex, multi-celled invertebrates of the Cambrian period. Not when scientists have noted that neither proteins nor nucleic acids could have arisen without the other. Currently, there is no solid evidence-supported conclusion for these problems. In conclusion, the evidence for evolution is fragmentary at best and is most definitely not abundant enough to make evolution considered a fact. If there are so many unknowns in something my opponents are claiming to be fact, the very definition of which is something that is known and proven, how can we ever be expected to believe that evolution is fact? Thank you.
Opposition rebuttal.
So, as the fourth proposition rebuttal stated, they use dinosaurs evolving into birds as their main evidence. But this is already proven false using our evidence on the second opposition argument that disapproves the evolutionary theory. So I would like to introduce a new term. It's called morphology. It's basically a branch of biology that studies the form of living organisms and the relationships between their structures. And as I've used before, the Institute for Creation Research states that old and new models are relying on morphology, which might result in forming composite species. And this results that both models are unreliable and inaccurate. Also, the fourth proposition rebuttal, that we already use evidence to disapprove their arguments. And also stated by the website Wired, I would like to introduce a new argument that Darwin uses pangenesis to fill the void in his tree of life theory. Basically, pangenesis is a theory used to fill his misunderstanding or his misconception about the theory. And also, evidence used in my argument proves the fourth. In conclusion, that the fourth proposition rebuttal and the second opposition constructed false. And also the seventh speaker used DNA as evidence, but it's already proven false by James' argument about how DNA mutations are more harmful than beneficial. Thank you.
The seventh proposition rebuttal.
Hello everyone, I'm Michaela. I suppose that evolution is a fact, and in my part I will use Hox genes to prove about it. Hox genes is a group of related genes which can decide how the body part will form and look like, and they can be found in every animal. The similarity between of them are remarkable. For example, genes which are closer to 3' will always form head feature, and those which are closer to 5' will decide expressions in tails. And if you compare more about them between our vertebrates, then you will find that they always show highly similarity. And this kind of similarity can be strong evidence to prove that we all inherited them from a common ancestor. And apart from homology, Hox genes can also provide evidence for morphological transformation in evolution. The point is, what will happen if Hox genes does not go on the right way? There is one experiment researching about what will happen if put the Hox genes of mice, which decide the expressions of forelimbs into mice. And the result was the forelegs of mice got longer for about 3 centimeters. Then I'd like to use ultrabisal for further discussion. First of all, we should know that ultrabisal one of the functions of ultrabisal is to repress the wing formation. And in this way, Drosophila will have a pair of wings and a pair of headless. But in the case of ultrabisal loss of function mutants, the repression normal work and it will result to a 4 wings flies. And it can be a really good example to explain how does mutants work on Hox genes to make a species looking totally different in their appearance. And according to these two evidence, I support that evolution is a fact. Thank you.
The eighth proposition.
Hi everyone, my name is Kevin. I'm here to support evolution is a fact. Okay, let's talk about embryo. As we know, after egg and sperm combine with each other, the cell will go through many times cell division and then become gastrula. The ectoderm can form skin, nail, nose, eyes, and nervous system. The endoderm can form internal digestive tract,
respiratory tract, liver, and other glands. The mastodon confer exterior circulation and motor system. It can be clear to see that gastrula from each creature's organs are similar. For example, the forewing of animals, they form from the same gastrula layer and have the same bone structure. Plus, a study published in Nature indicates that a common mechanical sensitive pathway involving beta-catenin specified early mesodermal identity at gastrulation in zebrafish and Drosophila, which means they have the same transcription factor to form mastodon. This suggests mastodon mechanical induction dating back to at least the last bilateral common ancestor, more than 570 years ago, the period during which mastodon is thought to have emerged. In little conclusion, there is evidence that two species has common ancestor by the formation of mastodon, not to mention us or other creatures. For this reason, I support evolution is true.
Good morning, worthy opponents, fellow debaters, and the esteemed audience. My name is Hope Yang, and I'll be arguing for the opposition, with the stance that the theory of evolution is fiction due to evidence against the explanation of uniformitarianism and the old Earth. Uniformitarianism is the idea that geological processes of Earth has always changed in uniform ways. So by observing present rates of change, the past can also be determined. It is well known that Darwin used this idea as the basis for his theory. He concluded that it would require hundreds of millions of years for evolution to take place, and he used uniformitarianism as basis for support of the age of Earth. Now, what if uniformitarianism was not valid throughout the entirety of Earth's history? Darwin's explanation of evolution does not stand if the age of Earth is not proven. Species would not have had the time to evolve. First of all, the explanation of catastrophism opposes that of uniformitarianism. Violent natural events create similar effects in small amounts of time. From the volcanic eruption of Mount St. Helens, it has been shown that thin, delicately laminated pyroclastic deposits can be created rapidly. This was a natural event that goes directly against uniformitarianism, which would have assumed that deposits were products of slow processes that would have taken over thousands of years. Moreover, the preserved fossils of fish and other more delicate organisms suggest the same, since the inevitable rotting would take away the original structure of the animal by the time it was truly preserved if you explain it by uniformitarianism. Another example is that of rapid erosion, which can happen by abrasion, hydraulic action, and cavitation, which is the likes of Glen Canyon Dam. This all further goes against the idea of uniformitarianism. Big changes can indeed happen in small amounts of time. To further argue against Earth's age, carbon dating has already proven to be inconsistent in many areas, and other forms of radiometric dating are in question. For example, if you date a piece of zircon by the amount of the ratio of uranium and lead in it, it may prove faulty because lead can diffuse out of the crystal due to heat and burial. To conclude, because of evidence against the idea of uniformitarianism and the age of Earth, Darwin's theory of evolution does not stand on fact and is proven to have uncertain, if not false, basis. Thank you.
Oh no.
Hello, my name is Jeffrey from Morrison Academy, Kaohsiung, and I'll be rebutting my opponent's Katrina. So my opponent Katrina wanted me to explain the idea of short-term bones of dinosaurs, and I'd like to first give an example of a parent. So if a parent has if your parent is tall and you have kids, then most likely your kids are tall. But the problem is that people with tall parents can still have kids that are shorter than their parents. So that might be explained the reason of the short-term bones, since it's just some species, some offspring have shorter body parts or like characteristics than their parents. Now I would like to move on to my conclusion. So to sum up our debate, I would like to restate our points. My teammate Josh talked about the probability of Darwin's microevolution occurring. My teammate James talked about how gene mutations are usually more harmful than beneficial. My teammate LouV talked about how many transitional fossils are absent in the fossil record and proved that they are unreliable. And lastly, my teammate Hope disproved Darwin's explanations of the age of Earth through arguing against uniformitarianism. Thank you.
Conclusion and summation.
Hi, greetings. My name is Yan, and after my teammate had discussed a lot of information to prove that evolution is right, I'm going to summarize that why the evolution is fact. At first, we take natural selection and sexual selection, for instance, to elaborate the conception that evolution is an essential process for species to inherit their offspring. Next, we also use biogeology to show that homologous organs can have the common ancestor, and continual drift to show that fossil records are the powerful evidence to assess the evolution. Moreover, we take comparative anatomy, for example, to show that organisms with slightly natural differences can help to their survival. And during the process of evolution, species can adapt to their environment gradually. Furthermore, we use lots of molecular biology, like host gene and RNA origin, to show that life is also composed from the simple to complex. With sequencing the whole entire gene, we can certainly know that the microevolution is fact. From macroevolution to microevolution, we can prove that evolution is a fact and science. It is solid and real. However, in the 21st century, we still can say that we are omniscient or we know everything. Maybe evolution is not perfect, even have some points being challenged. But it doesn't mean that evolution is just a fiction. In conclusion, in contrast, it means that our knowledge still can clarify that puzzle merely. In conclusion, the puzzle which we had solved are the evidence to prove that evolution is a fact. It is science, and its evolution works. Thanks.
Hello. Jeffrey, right? I want to say evolution includes microevolution and macroevolution. Sexual solution, natural solution, and geography solution is a macroevolution. It's a macroevolution, and they both is the foundation of Darwin's theory of evolution. And my teammate, Rich and Cheri, they show us what is the microevolution, because the macro and microevolution supports. That's why we believe the evolution is fact. Thank you.
Okay.
So I would like to ask a question: how microevolution can play into macroevolution? Because yeah, since my opponents were all arguing about microevolution.
Okay, they need time to come up with the answer. Any other questions?
Shall I redefine it?
Come on, don't let your opponent
Yeah, don't be shy.
Don't let your opponent ask a question. You don't need to say it.
Redefine the term. Give Ian. Not you, Ian.
As your question is how microevolutions can accumulate to macroevolution. Yeah. Okay. You just have to think that many microevolutions and plus together when the time is very long, and you will see the macroevolution.
Follow it?
Yes.
No.
I'm sorry, George isn't on our team, but okay. Anyways, I think I would like to clarify what Jeffrey's kind of saying. He's saying that you guys are pulling examples of microevolution to say that, like, for instance, a snake could become like a bird. But by pulling microevolution, you're only saying that a squirrel can develop a favorable trait and then become like, such as a peppered moth, you can become a different color, like that. So I think our question is like, can you give like examples of how this happens and how like, because from a reptile to a bird, like think about it. A transitional form with like scales and feathers, they can't fly, they're vulnerable. It's not a favorable trait and it won't pass on. So like, I think that was what he was trying to say. Like, how is microevolution going to accumulate to become macroevolution? Yeah.
Okay, so when I was doing my constructive statement, I talked about spontaneous generation and how that has already been disproved. So technically, spontaneous generation states that the common ancestor, that one living organism, was produced by a primordial soup that was full of non-living minerals and chemicals. If that whole concept has already been disproved, then how can you explain for the fact that there was a common ancestor that's produced all of these other species if the basis has already been proven false? Well, because that technically makes all of the other evidence irrelevant because the basis or the start of the entire theory is already false. So then what happens to the rest of the stuff? Why is that still true? Yeah.
Are you addressing?
Yeah. Who? Them. All of them.
You're addressing
Josh. Rich.
As I mentioned not clearly before, there are also has experiment done in 2015 that scientific daily that they have discovered that amino acid and nucleotide can create protein and RNA. And also, there is a scientist called Sutherland that they found that RNA have a process can reconstruct RNA also. Yes. This is this is the experience that's recently. Yes, also. Thank you.
I'm here to mention some further information about how can one things being complicated. That's about what you ask. And look at this picture. It's about Hox genes, and you can see that it was very simple at the first time, and it can be very complicated at last. And it was because of the duplication and divergences. And if you look at this Hox genes is zebrafish. You can see that its genes have been doubled. And you can A prime, B prime, C prime, and D. So it is a good example to explain that things can be complicated by duplicated. That is my yes.
Okay, next one. Come on. We don't have too much time.
Hi, I want to reply to a sixth opposition construction. James? Is it James? Oh, okay. He said mutation is harmful than beneficial, right? Okay, actually mutation is based on a probability, doesn't categorize to harmful, beneficial, good or bad, something like that. This is just a little chance to be adaptive to environment, then the species can alive until now. Of course, we've seen all organisms nowadays more likely to be beneficial, so we can alive until right now, right? Okay, since 500,000 years ago until now as human beings. Okay, after that, how microevolution become macroevolution? We can see many evidence of microevolution nowadays, just like what I talked about just now, and like this one, a polypprotein AI milano, or something like bacteria that can digest nylon was discovered after 40 years. That after nylon was invented by humans. Okay, then as we said that. We didn't say that reptiles become birds in the evolution, but we suggest that reptile and bird have a common ancestor. Then we evolved to until right now, like reptile and birds. Okay, that's all.
Wait, so you need me to clarify what I said? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. So about 90% of the time, they do not affect the individual. So only 9% of the time they don't. And only 10% that they do infect the individual. And 1 out of the 10% are those mutations beneficial. And that 1% of the beneficial mutations rarely even physically change the organism. Okay, wait, what's your name again?
I'm not Christian.
Oh, okay.
Another challenge? Yes. No.
Answer to LouV. You say genetic variation is not good, but genetic variation makes us diverse and can adapt to different environments.
You need her to rephrase the question again.
Sure.
Okay. 请你把问题再讲一遍，讲清楚。
You said genetic variation is not the best way to prove evolution, but it can help us adapt to different environments.
Just to clarify, that was not my intention. I didn't say that. What I said was, if the theory of evolution was correct, there should be a significant amount of fossils preserved in the earth where it shows transformational structures, which come from genetic mutations or natural selection. So that was not my intention. Yeah.
Sit down.
I actually have a serious issue. Don't let him stop.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, hi. For some people with religions, evolution is one of the big stumbling blocks to people today being received to the gospel of Jesus Christ. If Adam in Bible was not a real person, and if there was not a real fall and a real curse, then the whole story will no longer making sense. Young people see evolution as inextricable link with atheism, but it isn't simply just about intellectual belief, because belief shapes actions. For some people, believe in evolution is undermining the moral fundamentation of the one-street society. This is the reason why they tend to against the evolution, because the evidence we get makes this world more colder and colder, even ruthless. To be honest, I hope this debate wouldn't have the end of the day. To creationism, I need you to tell me that I'm not bad. Actually, I'm a good person in the deep down. And for evolutionism, I need you to believe in science and seeking more information and evidence to make this society more progress and civilizations. To sum up, I think both creationism and evolutionism are essential factors for this balance for the society. Thanks.
Wait, it's Ian, right? Yeah. Are you assuming that we're arguing from a creationist standpoint?
Pardon?
Are you assuming that we're arguing from a creationist standpoint?
Oh, no, not.
Then why do you bring up religion into this debate?
We take all the evidence, the number to prove that evolution is a fact. Okay, so you can take some evidence to prove that Okay, evolution is a fiction. You take a lot of examples to show that evolution have something ambiguous, but we hope that you take the specific and concrete example to show that we are wrong.
Okay, a valid question is that if theory of evolution is fiction, what would be the alternative? Alternative model. What would be the alternative if evolution is fiction? Okay, how do we explain all this? The origin of life, the biodiversity, all the variability. What would be the alternative? What is the truth?